This is an oral history interview with Roe R professor Amy Sage Webb. It is taking place in her office in Plumhouse 404U on October 10th, 2018. The interviewer is Camille Abdel-Jawad. This interview is part of the Roe R. Professor's Oral History Series, organized by Emporia State University's Special Collections and Archives. All right, should we get started?
Sure.
All right, so why don't you start by telling me a little bit about yourself?
That's a broad question. What would you like? What would you like to know?
Well, I would like to know a little bit about where you were born, family background, formal education. I already know all these things, but for our potential listeners.
Right. Well, as you know, I was born in Ohio, and I grew up in the Dayton, Ohio area. I went to Ohio University, where I studied journalism, minored in ancient history and political science. You notice English is not in there. I studied English when I went for my master's at Kansas State University, which is how I developed a connection to Kansas. Prior to that, I had no connection to Kansas, but you know how Kansas is. It's sort of like the center of the monopoly board, and every once in a while it just tilts and everybody falls into the middle. So we all belong in Kansas at some point. So I grew up in Ohio. My family, none of my family still live there. My parents retired years ago to Florida, so I don't get back there very often. After that education, I went to Arizona. As you know, I graduated from Arizona State. I worked in California and Los Angeles. So is this what you were after?
Absolutely.
Kind of stuff
just a little bit of background information.
Yeah.
So in your nature, though, you did your MFA. You're a creative writer. So I want to know what kinds of things are you writing right now?
Oh, right now.
Currently.
This is an interesting time. I took sabbatical in 2015 to finish a collection of short fiction, and that collection is starkly realistic. But during the writing of that, I started becoming fascinated with new fabulism and magical realism, which seemed like the best way to get close to the surreal realness of our existence sometimes. And so I started creating a profile of those stories that was quite different, and so that book started looking different than I thought it was originally going to look. And then some of the realistic components of it, I started to grapple with the recognition that those needed to be nonfiction. And so now I have these two things going on that are very different. They're very different parts of my personality. I have this nonfiction collection of essays which addresses a whole range of things. Living as I have for all these years in the country, which was never something I imagined for myself, and what that has taught me is sort of the central theme. And then around that are things that I need to talk about academically, things I've learned from our peculiar moment in political and national history, and the role that academics plays in that. Lots of interesting lenses coming through that book. And then of course I have this fiction that is growing increasingly speculative in nature. And so these are two very different children that I'm feeding, and it's great. I love it. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the fact that you're doing two different projects and they're so different. But you do have a lot of other responsibilities and things you do around campus, so how do you find that time to devote to your craft?
Well, it helps to not approach what I'm doing here as being antagonistically oppositional to my own projects. So in part, the work that I do with students needs to feed that. And I've been very lucky at ESU to work with students like you, like some students that I have in the graduate program right now, whose research and writing allows me to be curious about things that I'm curious about as a writer as well. And so at the end of the day, I get to go home having had conversations and correspondence with writers who are also doing this work. And it's energizing to be able to do that. Work that I do in teaching critical theory and literature does that same feeding if you let it, right?
Right. So you do partake in a lot of reading and critiquing. I know that you read all of your students' work on a daily basis, and then you also do a lot of other critiquing for other writers in our literary community.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of transitioning, what is something that you are most proud of that you've produced? Can you tell me about a work or a particular piece or something that you're
As
really
a literary
proud of?
citizen, you mean?
As something that you've written that you're really proud of.
I think I'm most proud of whatever I did most recently. Fairly recently, I wrote an essay for my alma mater, Ohio University's alumni magazine, and they were starting a new magazine called Ohio Woman, and they asked me to be part of, I was one of the original Ohio women, and I thought, oh wow, this is strange, not what I saw for myself as an undergraduate, and they asked me to write for that as a creative writer rather than being interviewed and done as a profile. And I loved doing that. I loved going back into thinking about who I had been at that age when I was an undergraduate and what wisdom I think I took from it. It was just a great opportunity.
Yeah. Did you have any particular influential professors when you were an undergraduate?
I did. As an undergraduate, I had an advisor, Michael Bouget. He wasn't my advisor, and I went to enroll, and they said, "I'm sorry, you have this new advisor." And he said he'd taken my records and taken me over because he really needed to get me on track. He said, "You're really a creative writer, you know." And I said, "I don't think so." But he said, "You are. I want you to try something." He said, "You've got all the credits. You can graduate as a journalist, and you're really good at that. But I think your heart might lay somewhere else." Mm-hmm. And he said, "There's this literary conference in New York, and I want to help you to go there and meet these people and see if this is a community where you see your face. And if not, no harm, no foul. But I really want you to try this." And of course, he was completely right, and it changed my life.
So was that the first time that you really practiced creative writing? Or had you done anything beforehand?
I had done it. I had always enjoyed writing, but the idea of pursuing a career in it was utterly foreign to me. The only models I had of that were English teachers whom I'd had in high school, and I was pretty sure that wasn't what I was going to do. I didn't know anything about literary editing. I didn't know of those intersections between journalism and creative writing, the entire independent publishing world. This was all foreign to me. Performance of creative writing in writing series and the ways that we involve ourselves in that community as reviewers and serving on editorial boards. This wasn't all that far from what I was doing in journalism, but it was just invisible to me at that time.
You know, when you first asked me to do this interview, I was so honored, but I was also a little bit surprised because something of this magnitude feels very important and very, huge. And so those who are watching or looking back on this might be surprised to hear that I'm actually your student and not a professor or a colleague or something like that. And I have been your student from my very first class at ESU to my very last.
Freshman seminar, right?
I know. And so as I've been, reflecting on that, it's been interesting to hear you say about the influential professors in your life, because you're definitely one of the influential professors in my life. And I had never considered even doing an English major until I came in here and you said, well, why not? Why do you have to do something that you don't want to be passionate about? So
I remember that conversation.
Yeah. And so that's interesting. But you are a Roe R Cross Distinguished Professor, which is a huge, huge honor and one of the highest honors that we can have here in Emporia State. So I have to ask, what does being a Roe R Cross Professor mean to you?
There are two things I heard in there that I think I want to speak to, and one is your confusion about why I would want to be interviewed by a student. And the other is, what does it mean to be a Roe Cross professor? And I think I have to start with the first assumption, and that is, well, you're here because it's always wonderful to talk to you. And we've done a huge range of things here. And that's one of the great things about teaching at Emporia State, is that you can know a student from freshman seminar all the way through graduate school, and you can engage in such a range of activities, grant-funded summer research.
Sure.
You can do academic coursework, you can do high-impact learning experiences, work in the honors college, and we've done all of those things. And I think that that is one of the things that makes a Roe Cross professor, or any professor, become the best she can be. You have to keep growing, and you have to keep challenging your pedagogy, your craft, your scholarship in a place like ESU, because you're going to see these students again, and you're going to have to keep developing your game. And it's a long-term investment in them, and it's a long-term investment in your own academics. And so, you know, you're the perfect person to be here. I think that's a great measure of what my life is at ESU, is working with students like you. And that, of course, leads to what I think it means to be a Roe Cross professor, is to find a way that your teaching, your scholarship, and your service are continuing to become the best that they can possibly be, taking advantage of everything that we have here at ESU to continue to grow and change and develop. I always admired those people whose pictures were on the wall, and never thought of myself as one of them, sharing that august company. But when I think about them, and they're people I've worked with for years and admired, they have that drive and that curiosity to be interested in students and research and excelling in their own craft, right?
Yeah. That's a really good point. I know that when I have a chance to work with a Roe R Cross professor, it's definitely an honor, because not only is this individual being recognized for their hard work, it's also pushing them to achieve more and more. And so I think that definitely that comes to mind when I think of you, and I think of all of the experience, like you've mentioned, that we've had in between, you know, our field studies and working with other creative writers, and the research grant that we did this summer. It definitely feels like these are things that you're very passionate about. And you are constantly innovating and creating new programs within the English department. So you have these ideas, and you have the means to make them happen. But what does that process look like when you have a new idea for something you want to implement within our program?
Chaos, that's what it looks like.
Yes.
For a while. You know, I used to be very self-critical. We talk about this, about self-criticism and how powerful that is. And I used to be very critical of myself, because I was always coming up with these ideas. And I would say, oh, you're such a dilettante, you need to just settle down, and you'll never be good at anything. You know, that self-critical voice that wakes you up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I think we were talking about that.
Yes, we were.
Yeah. And then I said, well, what if your great talent or gift in this life is to do those things? Maybe that is your particular calling.
Sure.
Is to embrace it and say, do the thing that's scary, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as I said that to myself, everything started to happen. We started to be able to build and sustain things that I'd always dreamed of, but that self-critical voice had gotten in the way. So the process is that, first of all, you get out among people a lot. I mean, talk to as many people as you possibly can. Find out what's going on in the world you live in, what's going on in your community. Talk to the custodians and the registration staff and the people who work at the bookstore and the people who work at the Arts Council, and look in every interaction for ways that we can build something better than what we have.
Sure.
That's the process. And so when you cross paths with someone, I just crossed paths with our tech liaison out in the lounge area the other day, and we were chatting about other things and came up with a great idea for developing an online program. You don't get that unless you're having these conversations. And then, of course, the next step is that it's scary because you think, I don't have time for this. I don't want to do it badly. But you start thinking about how you're going to build it and what it's going to take and whom it benefits and why we would do it. And you start doing the work that scares you to death, right? You can sit back and you can say, well, I'm not going to do it until I know where the support or this is going to come from. Or you can just kind of exuberantly throw yourself into it and say, we're going to apply for this grant, and then we'll deal with the difficult problem of having it when we have the grant, right? And that's what you do. And it makes every day an adventure for sure.
I remember when we were applying for the Emporia's Summer Undergraduate Research Program, it's a grant to do individual research with a faculty mentor. I remember thinking, there's no way we're going to get this. No way. It's so competitive. There's so many amazing, science-based projects and all of these cool things. I thought, there's no way.
Right.
And you said, well, let's just try. Let's just see what happens. And then we ended up doing it, and that is one of my favorite memories from my undergraduate career, is that I got to do such a special project that was highly individualized, but that would have never happened if we wouldn't have just been like, let's try it. So
be optimistic, right?
Yeah.
Why not? Yeah, that was a great project. That was one of my favorite summers, I think, working with you.
Yeah,
I can't wait to see this novel. I know. Right now it's chaos, right?
It is chaos.
Right?
And I think that can be said about anything, and perhaps that's one of the most important things that you've taught me, is to slow down in my writing and in my life, both kind of a double whammy, but to slow down and have those human experiences, and whether that's cooking or whether that's just walking around and having an open mind and seeing everything that is out there. Because, like you said on Monday, something will happen and it will be fine. And honestly, if we stop stressing so much, that those things are going to happen. And I think that is one of the most important things that you've taught me through my work and also through our experiences together.
We sort of want to be made without going through the process of becoming something, right? I want to get this degree. I don't like that word get. Get up, get it made. But you have to become something, and that means that you have to be broken. You have to be chaotic a little bit. You got to break things down in order to build something, and that's the part that I think we're all reluctant to do. That's a big lesson of education. We've studied myth and archetype, and that's what all of our archetypes tell us, is that education, learning is extremely painful. Right?
It's vulnerable.
Yes.
It's just like when we're sitting in workshop and you're saying, okay, here is this piece that I have just put my heart and soul into, and I'm ready for you guys to tell me all the things that could make it even better. And sometimes that's hard, but being vulnerable is so important.
Right. And how would you write anything if you weren't able to slow down and be present? Poetry is a good meditation to pay attention to moments, right? Being willing to be in the mess is increasingly difficult because we have technology and we always want an app to save us. You can remember when we were working on those book projects with the middle schoolers and the elementary school children. I mean, that's chaos. 30 fifth graders writing.
Yes, that's chaos in itself.
Right. And what we just did on Saturday with the Children's Book Award writers. And then there's this desire we have to say, well, I've made an Excel spreadsheet, or I have a Asana project manager software, and this is going to solve all the problems, right? But it's still going to be a long night. There's still going to be a moment when we have no idea how this is going to come together.
Absolutely.
And it's meeting that confusion and bringing a group of people together to do that work that we remember. It's not getting what we expect. That's never rewarding, right? It's the day when we show up and remember the school kids are moved into the gym and we don't know what we're going to do with them. And, yeah.
Or when they had a cattle, they like raised a cow and sold it. I don't know. They have some pretty crazy
Not the way we
experiences.
planned that day,
No.
was it?
So I guess a good question is, you've lived and you've studied in a lot of beautiful places, Arizona, California, a lot of interesting places, and worked with a lot of interesting people, and yet you've been here at ESU for a really long time. So why are you here, and why do you continue to stay here?
Gosh, good question. I did not tactically make the decision to come to Emporia. I came because there was an opportunity, and I just kept having the opportunity to do more interesting things. And over time, that's added up to an extraordinary range of experiences that I think I could only have had here. So in terms of work, this has always been a rewarding job. It's always been a challenging job. It's always given me chances to go beyond my comfort zone. Why would I not want that job? You know what I'm saying? And working here has really made me own my face in a different way. I think it's made me a better person, as saccharine as that might sound, because you do know people, because you see them again. You have to treat everyone like an asset and an ally. In a town of this size, in a university of this size, you get to know everyone as complex and multifaceted human beings, and that's a pretty important way to live. So it has to do with personhood and academics, but then I also fell in love with this place. And it was not a landscape that was natural to me, that I responded to immediately. It really humbled me. This preponderance of sky at all times was not the woods that I thought were familiar. It wasn't the desert either. And I started to listen to it, and it really taught me some things about writing, actually, and about patience, and it humbles me to this day. As you know, I live in a rural situation where I'm continually dealing with weather. Yesterday there was flooding.
Yes.
But I've learned a lot about the Flint Hills, about the creatures that inhabit our region, about the biology of our region. And that's been extraordinary, to be connected to this place. I've heard, Bill Moyers said that it was Joseph Campbell who said it. I need to find out if this is true. But Moyers says that Campbell maintains that a moral person is one who knows when she turns on the tap where the water comes from and where the water goes. And I like that literally and metaphorically. Right. Because it reminds us of maybe how we're supposed to live. And Kansas is a place where I have been able to live that way. I quite literally know where my water comes from and where it goes, right? And that's been extraordinary.
Yeah. I think for me, the decision to come to ESU to attend class here completely changed the trajectory of where my life was going. I wholeheartedly believe that if I had gone somewhere else, someone else would have said something to me, I wouldn't be the person I am today or be going in the direction that I was. So is there one thing that has really changed the direction of your life, the direction of your ambitions? One moment, one event that you can remember?
This is one of those things where fiction lies, because we always have these precipitating events in fiction, and yet our lives never quite distill down to those simple moments as easily. I'm not sure that I could say there was one event, but I can say that I did make a conscious decision a few years ago, and we've talked about this, that I wanted to see what it would look like to live peace as a transitive verb.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this in class, didn't we?
Yeah, maybe so, yeah.
We have all these verbs for everything that's not peace. Battle, fight, right? And it's paradoxical to say, I'm going to fight for peace, right? We've only got that one verb, which is love. It's a noun and a verb. And I thought, how could you make peace a transitive verb? How could you peace on somebody, right? What would that look like? And you know, this is my teaching thing, and this is my writing thing, is I'll start with a question like, what would that look like? It's the what if question. What if? And so what would that look like? And I started trying to live by that, and it changed everything. And one of those gifts that came with that inquiry was the celebration of and gratitude for what is rather than what is not. If you start every email message just responding to whatever somebody said, here's your piece of paper, right? Or you can pause and you can say, thank you. Thank you for your message, which reminds you there's a human on the other end of that, and I'm having this interaction, and then you're in a totally different headspace.
Sure.
That's the headspace from which you observe and you write, not the reactive, manic, doing things space, but that space of contemplation. And we've talked about this in creative writing as well, responding to what is not there. The aesthetic of absence doesn't help you write very well. It's very product oriented, isn't it?
Sure.
So when you come into workshop and you're saying, I just want to know how to make my story better, which places the ability to shape that story and to classify it and understand it outside you, right? And it places everybody reading it in a very transactional mode in which we're telling you, well, here's what I didn't like, here's what you need to do, and we're demanding things, versus all of us being invested in what you've done and saying, here are the implications of the decisions Camille has made on the page. Camille has chosen this first person narrator, and we know as fellow writers some of the things that will do and some of the things that makes harder. So now we're engaged in a creative headspace in looking at this instead of as a failed product. We're saying, let's talk about the process of this work. How can we start to be excited about it? I find that energizing to go home at the end of the day having thought about all the possibilities in work rather than everything that it lacks, right? So all of that arises out of that central curiosity of saying, what would it look like to live in this way?
I think it's a lot easier to say, oh, here are all the things you need to change, all the things that you don't have, but it's hard and it's risky to say,
right,
here are the things that we can build based on what you have. So that's a really good point.
We've kind of told ourselves that it would be Pollyanna to praise anything. And we've created this false binary that says you can be unrealistic or realistic.
Sure.
And the unrealistic person thinks everything's fine, and the realistic person sees that there are all these problems. That's a false binary, right? It doesn't tell you how to act. It doesn't tell you what to do. It's very obsessed with classification, right?
Yeah.
I think we academically get very wrapped up in the taxonomy of power, of injustice, of flaw, and we say, here's what's wrong. We want you to learn all the ways that this isn't working, but it doesn't help us to know what to do about it, right? And so this is one of the things in creative writing pedagogy, and I worked in creative writing pedagogy for many years, trying to develop a pedagogy that was as robust as what composition has, and other areas of academic discourse. And creative writing really didn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
We had a discourse that said, here's something I do, right? It was very anecdotal. And what would it look like to have a creative writing pedagogy? What is our theory? Did it arise out of the writing process movement? But you had to look at those kinds of questions. Because in creative writing, it's not enough to say, we're going to do a close reading of the text.
Right.
The writer has to be able to take that home and know how to act
Sure.
and what to do about it. And every conversation that we have should make the writer less dependent on what we have to say instead of more dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very interesting pedagogical problem to have,
Yeah.
isn't it?
I think there's also this false binary of good and bad. Your work is
Right.
good, your work is bad.
Right.
It's not that black and white,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that the decisions you make as an author, whether the reader or us as critiquers, whether we agree with them or not, what are the effects that has
Mm-hmm.
on a piece? And I love the binary between good and bad because it's so meticulous in the sense that we can never be all good or all bad.
Mm-hmm.
Even our work can never be all good or all bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find it very interesting that you bring that up and that you have such a unique way of looking at creative writing as a mentor and as a professor. I remember when we were working on my novel, you were always encouraging, even when you were saying this needs to be developed. And I never felt like you were ever attacking me or attacking my work, but I always felt that you had this interest in making me a better writer, but also making my piece so much better. And even if I didn't necessarily agree completely with what you had envisioned, I just respect that so much because you are in the game not to have these perfect pieces, but to develop us as people and as writers, which goes back to what it means to be a mentor and a professor.
Well, I'm glad that was a positive experience for you.
It definitely was.
Good.
So, another question I have for you is, what does success look like to you?
Success looks like what you just described, which is that each step that you take opens the next world of opportunity. I don't think success is finding a pinnacle and looking down from it, but that it's a path that just keeps getting wider. And while it's getting wider, it's making the path wider for the people behind you. That's what I think success looks like.
It's definitely a ripple effect when you look at it like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, speaking of success, I took a look at your CV and I was blown away at all of the multitude of pages, and I hope that one day if I have half as many experiences as you, I will be even just amazed.
You just have to get old.
Oh my gosh! So, kind of speaking to that, what are some of your professional goals moving forward?
My goals moving forward from now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would like to shepherd those two projects that I just mentioned into the world. That's important to me. Professionally, I am starting to involve myself with some different communities. I've been teaching eco-criticism, and I'm interested in the intersection between some literary criticism and writing that's going on in those communities. Going to conferences like Western Literature Association and ASLE is a different set of people for me to work with than the AWP crowd,
sure.
right? The Association of Writing Programs is massive, and I've spent a lot of time with writers and editors and publishers, etc. And so this is a new community. And I'm also very interested in new fabulism and speculative fiction, and I've just started reviewing for New York Review, and I'm reviewing speculative fiction, so I'm kind of immersing myself in that community, which is a great new set of conversations to be having. And within that community, I think people are doing really innovative things with writing and literature, we're starting to see more of an audio community, for example. Over the summer, I took a course in recording and podcasting, and I bought the equipment. Yeah, we have a damper box downstairs in the record center. You didn't know this, but we do. And thinking about how to start to reach different audiences and deliver literature and writing differently through audio, because I think this is very relevant to the way we live. So these are areas that I'm excited about, that I'm pursuing, that are a little off my game, right?
That's interesting, but also kind of plays into what you're interested right now with your two bodies of work. I actually didn't know this, but you have a book published. Do you only have one, or do you have multiple?
I have this book, and I'm working on the other two, so.
Wow. So I'm amazed, first of all. You've never mentioned that in the 4 years I've known you, that, you have a book. Do you want to read anything from it, or care to share anything from it?
I could.
I would like to hear a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Well.
Throwing you off your game.
Yeah, we were just talking about this before this started, and you saw this on my desk because I was going to send it to someone. That's funny. I can't believe I never gave you one, but that's okay. How about a poem? Because we should be short. And this is a fiction collection, but it has a couple of poems in it. This one, I think this is a good poem because it arises out of a sense of place, writing about Kansas, things that I learned living the way I do, and it's for my former program co-director, who took another job. We went to graduate school together, we worked here together, we knew each other very well, and the idea of directing this program without him was calamitous at the time. But I wrote this poem for him. It's for Phil Heldrick. It's called Prairie Paradox. On the eve of your farewell, I cast into this gold, slanting light, melancholy with knowing this special June of rain on the roof, fields green without end, and yellow tufted wheat that is lifting with rising wind will be your last season here. Axiomatic how the coming of grief is certain, but never without a gift in its hands. How your leaving offers some lesson I will keep. Though it seems impossible, this fecund July we will lie on our backs, hands starring the air, wet with the juice of beefsteak tomatoes we have plucked, swollen from the vines, warm as hearts. We will hear the descant of frogs, thrumming these nights of stars, the snap of dragonflies at the screen, and know you are gone from this place. Surely what matters is not the rending of the seam, but the way I tear the hem of this skirt to run this length of pasture, dogs alongside. Not the door closing warm kitchen light behind me, but the field of fireflies winking this new dark. This quiet moment I am thinking of you, as the horizon blues, auguring signs. A dart of starlings opens the sky, and I feel the paradox, the absence your presence has brought. Not the coming of change, but our witness to its passing. Not the flight of birds, but the music they whistle.
Wow. You know, I'm not sure if I've ever really read any of your creative writing, which is crazy because you've read a whole lot of mine. Yeah, and I love hearing you read that because whenever you read us stories in class, I love hearing other people read them because the intonations they use and the way they read it makes me see it in a whole different way, and it's so special.
I don't think of myself as a good reader of my own work. there are people who love reading out. They like to perform, and I'm not one of them, but I like to hear other people do it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thing you talk a lot about in class and also in that poem is being immersed in your community and being having relationships with other people and being a literary citizen. So, what does being a literary citizen mean to you?
Well, we just mentioned one way that people enjoy being part of a community, which is being out. You have to find ways that work for you. I'm willing to be very public and to do a lot of work with groups of people, but then I'm somebody who wants to hermit crab home at the end of the day. So I'm not as likely to be out at open mic readings and literary events. So I'm going to take the role of being the person who will make the literary events, right? Who will build the reading series and find the money for it and book the people and write the introductions. And we all have a role to play in a literary community, and you have to find the one that works for you and to participate in it and to celebrate the work that other people do. We talk about this because we've edited on a journal before. That under each piece of writing is this iceberg of hidden people. That here's this tiny poem that's entered the world. And for that to happen, it's not that the writer wrote it and one person found it. It's that all of these people in between handled the mail. They logged it. They created the databases. They made sure it got read. There were primary and secondary readers. There's a huge number of people involved in bringing literature into the world. The gatekeepers of that domain, right? The people who run bookstores and who serve as the audience. We need more readers. We need as many readers as we need writers. Being a committed reader of other people's work, buying your friends' books, right? Celebrating their successes. We all play a role in this, and we have a real conscious choice to make there. You can make your social media feed a literary community, so that you're constantly in touch with what other writers and artists are doing, and it's feeding you. Or you can create a virtual reality that wears you down every day.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When you talked about hermit crabbing away back home, it reminded me of Monday night when we were just talking in here, and I walked out, and the office doors were closed, and I had to open them and go out through, and it reminded me of what you said about being the last one in the building.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something I resonate with a lot, because I'm often the last person at an event or doing things, but you give and give and give to this program, to your students. How do you find a reward in that, and how do you continue to stay so involved and have such a big impact on your students?
You know, one of the messages that was really strong for my generation was to be careful about expectations of nurture, right? And there's a lot of data to suggest, even to this day, that students bring a greater expectation of nurture to female faculty and to what are often characterized in these studies as the soft disciplines, right? Not the sciences so much as the humanities. And here we are in creative writing, right? The arts. So there's a huge expectation of nurture in these disciplines. And of course there's the potential for inequality inherent in that if students are more willing to look at certain disciplines as being serious, and this as being soft. So I think I carried that, and I thought, well, what am I to do with that knowledge? What does that mean? Does it mean not investing in students? How am I going to grapple with that, right? And I think there's another one of those false binaries, isn't there, right? So it was definitely a challenge for me as a creative writer and as a faculty member, as a woman in this discipline, to say, what's that role going to be for me? And I decided to live it in the most human and humane way that I could. Being the last person in the building is a quiet time. Everybody's gone. You're thinking the decks are cleared, right? When you're the last person in the building, you see this array of stuff that you have yet to do. And I think that's when you start stressing out and thinking, how am I going to get all this done? And there's a great temptation at that point to say, I could have gotten this done if it wasn't for this thing. Do you ever do that?
Yes.
Where you start to make the Barbies fight,
Absolutely.
right? And you say, well, this isn't getting done because of you. That's just not a productive headspace to be. And to instead say, as we were talking about on Monday, it's all worthwhile. It's all worthy of you. That was such a hard thing to say, because I think I had internalized this message really strongly about what was serious work, right? What was going to be valuable, and to just be willing to say to myself, it is all worthy of you, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Solving some student's advising challenge or filling out a piece of paper. It's when you start saying to yourself, this is beneath me, that you start getting into a headspace that doesn't allow you to do any worthy work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So some of it's mental. I mean, and I think sometimes things don't get done as well or as fast as you would like. But that's the price, isn't it? Am I answering this question?
No,
I think I'm
absolutely.
dancing around it. Yeah. One of my mentors as a graduate student used to always say, one of his axiomatic expressions was, the writer is the person who stays in the room. Stay in the room. And that's part of it too, is just being willing to stay through it, right?
Yeah.
The easy thing is to rush off to one thing after another, versus to stay in that moment and let it surprise you. I mean, we had a very transactional thing we were going to do on Monday. We had business to attend to, and we had a time scale, and then it became something else.
Yeah.
If you allow it
Right.
to be more than just say, oh, well, time's up.
Gotta go.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Are there anything else you wanted to touch on? Any last comments you would like to add before we close?
Well, thank you for chatting with me. I would like to thank you for that. And I guess I would like to ask you, as a student, what do you think is the measure of academic excellence, or of an outstanding faculty member? What does that look like to you?
That's a hard question. I think personally, a professor who is willing to invest their precious time into my education and my personal development is so worthwhile, because obviously I've been here 4 years. I've had a lot of professors, and they come and they go, but the professors who take a genuine interest not only in my academic work but who I am is so important, because we come to college to get our degree and go into the world, but we're also here because we're only 18 when we come in, and we're still developing, we're still becoming the people we're going to be, and that's hard and scary. But by having mentors and by having people who invest in your life as well as your academic work, that is so significant to me. And so I would like to thank you, I guess, for always fulfilling that role for me, and always knowing that if something were going on, I could always come up here and you would talk me off a ledge because I get on a lot of ledges, for sure. But
how do you think you'll use that in your life and your career?
I don't know. Yeah. I've learned a lot of things from you, especially about being present and being aware. But I definitely want to fulfill that role for someone else, and it kind of sparks that in me when you talk about your mentors and the people that you've looked up to and you've grown with in your undergraduate and graduate degrees. And I kind of think, oh, one day I'm going to be sitting somewhere and I'd be like, well, my mentor when I was an undergraduate, and telling these stories. And I think that stories are so powerful and important. So it makes me really happy that I've had this experience and I've had a chance to interact with you and form myself and form pave the future, I guess, for what's going to come.
And you're going to be working with young readers and writers yourself,
I hope so.
right?
Yes.
So, yeah, all that patience.
Yeah.
It's all worthy of us. It's a good use of our lives, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, what a great job to spend your life around creative endeavors, right?
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.